They say when you're happiest, you never see the storm coming. That was me. I was married to the love of my life, Daniel. He was kind, calm, thoughtful, the type of man who didn't just pull out chairs or open doors, but remembered how I liked my tea, always let me rant without interrupting, and kissed my forehead like I was his whole world. That day, we were celebrating his promotion. His entire family came. His mother, Mama D, his sisters Sarah and Nessa, and of course, Ethan. Ethan, Daniel's younger brother, charismatic, charming, too charming. I used to think he was just playful, flirty in the harmless way some men are. But that night, something shifted. We were in the garden, twinkle lights strung across the trees, music low, laughter floating through the air like perfume. I remember Daniel's arm wrapped around me as he gave a toast, his voice proud, eyes warm. And Ethan? Ethan was watching me. Not just watching, staring. The kind of stare that lingers too long, like a camera flash you can't blink away. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining it. Later, in the kitchen, he brushed past me, too close. His hand grazed my waist, and he leaned in whispering, "You've always been too good for him." I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. I told him to back off, firm, sharp. He smirked, that crooked, smug smile. "Don't act like you don't enjoy the attention." I remember walking out of that kitchen with shaking hands. I told Daniel that night, tried to anyway. But it was his big day. He was laughing, holding his niece, so full of joy. I didn't want to be the shadow over his celebration, so I stayed silent. That was my first mistake. Over the next few days, Ethan's behavior got worse, lingering around corners, making comments only I could hear. Every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me. I started locking our bedroom door. On the third night, everyone had gone to sleep. The house was quiet. I had just finished feeding the baby, Daniel's niece. She'd fallen asleep on my chest. I laid her in the crib and crawled into bed beside Daniel, who was already asleep. I remember how peaceful he looked. Then I heard it. A soft knock. My heart skipped. I didn't answer. Another knock, this time at the balcony door. I got up, confused. We were on the second floor. I opened the curtains. Ethan was standing there, on the balcony, smiling. I stared at him in disbelief. He mouthed something. "Let me in." I shook my head furiously. I backed away. He tapped the glass, his face darkening. That's when I heard the click. The front door. I rushed to lock the bedroom door, but I was too late. It creaked open slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway. My blood ran cold. Daniel didn't stir. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Ethan stepped inside, and then the screen fades to black. But in my memory, that night never ended. I wish I could say I screamed. I wish I had the courage to wake Daniel, to fight Ethan, to make noise. But fear froze me. It wrapped around my throat and silenced everything but my heartbeat. Ethan never touched me, not physically, but what he did next was far worse. The next morning, everything moved in slow motion. Mama D stormed into the kitchen like a woman possessed, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling with rage. "You filthy thing! How dare you do this in my house?" I stood there in confusion until Daniel walked in. His face, red, eyes wild, hands clenched. Then Ethan strolled in behind him and told the biggest lie I've ever heard. "I'm sorry, brother," he said, voice shaking like a victim. "I didn't want it to happen. I tried to stop her, I swear, but she kept coming to me, saying she was lonely. She begged me not to tell you. She said she was tired of pretending to love you." My blood turned to ice. "What?" I gasped, but he wasn't done. "And now, she says she's pregnant. It might be mine." Silence. I laughed, because it had to be a joke, because this level of insanity couldn't be real. Daniel, I whispered, reaching for him. He's lying, you know me, you know I would never be. But he didn't blink. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at me. He just spat. Right in my face. I staggered back like I'd been punched. You disgust me, he hissed. You were my wife. Mama D began to wail like someone had died. I let you into this family, she screamed. I fed you. I defended you. And this is how you repay us? It's not true, I sobbed. He came to my room. He's the one who… Liar, Sarah screeched. Whore, Nessa muttered under her breath. The next few minutes were a blur of screaming, grabbing, hair-pulling. They dragged me outside, dragged me barefoot in my nightdress. The neighbors watched. And I didn't fight. Because when the man you love, when the only person you trust, believes a lie that big, what's the point of speaking? I remember my knees scraping against the ground, my arms twisted, my voice hoarse from begging. And then, nothing. After that day, no one came to see me. Not Daniel, not his family, not even my own parents. I stayed in a tiny motel on the edge of town, nursing bruises and wondering how my world had collapsed in 24 hours. I tried to call my father. He didn't answer. I texted my sister. She read it and said nothing. The Daniels were too powerful, too respected. No one wanted to cross them. And me? I was just the broken girl with a ruined name and a belly full of doubt. Because yes, I was pregnant. And I didn't know whose baby it was. I hadn't told anyone, not even Daniel. I was going to surprise him. A letter tucked into a box, next to a pair of tiny booties I knitted myself. But that letter was now soaked in tears. That night, I packed a small bag. My wallet, my ID, the baby scan. I looked in the mirror one last time. My reflection looked like a ghost. A girl who once had everything, now with nothing but silence and shame. I stepped into the pouring rain. No goodbyes, no revenge, just pain. And the sound of thunder as I disappeared into the night. Pregnant, alone, and forever changed. I arrived in a town no one would look for me in. Gray skies, small buildings, and faces that didn't ask questions. I changed my name to Mari. No one questioned it. I told them I was a widow. They pitied me, which made it easier to stay invisible. I found a small room above a bakery. The walls were cracked, the windows creaked, but it was shelter. I sold the last piece of gold jewelry I had to buy a mattress and a secondhand crib. A few weeks later, I gave birth, alone. I named him Aiden. The moment I held him, everything broke and healed at once. His eyes were a mirror, not just of me, but of him. Daniel. It hurt to look at my own child and see the man who destroyed me, but I didn't let it show. Aiden deserved love. Aiden deserved peace. The first few months were chaos. I worked at a laundromat by day, cleaned a diner at night. I wore gloves to hide the blisters, smiled to hide the exhaustion. Every penny went into diapers, formula, rent. Some nights I didn't eat. Other nights I cried so hard my pillow stayed damp till morning. And yet, somehow, we survived. I kept a journal. Not because I wanted to remember, but because forgetting felt like betrayal. I wrote to Daniel. Every pain, every memory, every word I never got to say. Letters I'd never send. Pages filled with rage, heartbreak, and questions that haunted me in the dark. Did you even check if I was telling the truth? Was it that easy to believe I'd betray you? Do you ever miss me, or just hate me? But I never stopped writing, because putting the pain on paper made it easier to carry. Aiden grew fast. He laughed early, walked early. He called me Mama before his first birthday. And every time I looked into his eyes, the ache returned. But so did the strength. No one from the past ever came. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I started to believe maybe, just maybe, I could be forgotten. And then, something strange happened. My neighbor, Mrs. Clove, an old widow who lived below me, knocked one morning. He's beautiful, she said, watching Aiden play in the yard. He looks just like someone I used to know, A politician's son, I think. I saw him once in a magazine. What did you say your husband's name was again? My heart nearly stopped. I smiled and lied. Aaron. She nodded, but I saw the way her eyes narrowed, how her gaze lingered on Aiden's face. I pulled him close that night and didn't sleep. The next day, I left work late. The diner had been short-staffed, and I had to mop the floors myself. My back ached, my hands were sore. I climbed the stairs praying Aiden had stayed asleep in the old woman's care. But when I reached my door, I saw it, an envelope, cream-colored, no name, no stamp. I froze, picked it up with shaking fingers, opened it. Inside were 2 photographs. The first was of Daniel, in a suit, standing next to a black car, looking over his shoulder like someone had called his name. The second was of Aiden, taken from behind, in the park, sitting on a bench with his toy in his lap. I dropped the envelope. Someone knew. Someone had found us, and I didn't know who, or what they wanted next.
2 years. You can measure that time in minutes in holidays missed, in the quiet ache that crawls into your chest when you come home to silence. But for me, it's measured in mistakes. I'm not the man I was. I don't smile like I used to. I don't speak unless I have to. People around me say I've become cold, detached, and maybe I have. But they don't know what it's like to trust someone with your soul and then believe they ripped it apart with their bare hands. They don't know what it's like to spit on the one person who loved you the most and wonder every day since if you were wrong. Ethan lives on the outskirts of the city now. We don't talk. Not since that night. The night he came to my door, drunk, swaying like a man carrying something far heavier than alcohol. I was going to shut the door in his face, but he shoved something into my hand, a crumpled envelope. I don't deserve forgiveness, he slurred, but you should know. Then he turned and left. I didn't stop him. I didn't even open the letter that night. I stared at it for days. When I finally opened it, my world stopped. His handwriting was shaky, ink smudged in places, but the words were clear. I lied, I wanted her, always have. She never touched me, she begged me to stop, but I couldn't stand seeing you with someone so good, so pure. I thought if I destroyed her, I'd feel better, but I only destroyed myself. And you. I'm sorry, Daniel, the baby was never mine. I read it 10 times. 100. My hands shook so violently I tore the edges. I had called her a liar. I spit in her face. I let my mother curse her. I let my sisters drag her like she was filth, and she had done nothing. I thought about her face the last time I saw her, how broken her eyes looked, how she didn't even fight. That haunted me the most. I screamed, punched the wall until the skin on my knuckles tore. Then I fell to the floor and cried. I didn't know a man could cry like that. I searched for her everywhere, called her parents, begged. They told me they hadn't heard from her either. I checked shelters, hospitals, old neighbors, nothing. She was gone, vanished until today. I wasn't supposed to be there. The market was far from my usual route, but something pulled me in. Maybe it was fate, or guilt playing tricks on me. I walked past a row of fruit stands and my eyes caught a familiar shape. A woman, slim, strong posture, even in worn clothes, a scarf tied loosely around her curls. Then I saw the child, a boy, no older than 2, holding her hand, toddling beside her with bright, curious eyes that looked exactly like mine. I stopped walking. My heart exploded in my chest. Her back was to me. She was bargaining with a vendor, laughing softly. That laugh, God, I remembered that laugh. And the boy? He looked up at her like she was his whole world. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She turned. Her eyes found mine. Time stopped. Amara. She froze. Her smile vanished. Her body tensed, pulling the boy protectively closer. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just air and pain and 20 months of regret. Then I whispered, "Is that?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me for a second longer and shut the door in my face. Not a literal door, but the invisible kind, the one built from betrayal, pain, and silence. and I knew in that moment that finding her was only the beginning, of trying to be worthy of standing in front of her again. I didn't mean to follow her. My legs just moved, my mind blank, my heart thundering with something between hope and terror. She walked quickly, clutching the boy's hand like a shield, turning corners with the speed of someone desperate to disappear again. But I couldn't lose her. Not again. She reached a small, worn-down apartment building at the edge of the market. She looked over her shoulder once, eyes locking with mine, cold, guarded, unforgiving. She didn't scream. She didn't speak. She just opened the gate, walked up the steps, and shut the door. I stood there for minutes, maybe more, hands shaking, throat dry. I climbed the steps slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, the fragile moment might crack and vanish. When I reached her door, I didn't knock right away. I stared at the faded paint, the dent in the wood, the silence behind it. My hand hovered, suspended between the past and whatever this was now. Then, finally, I knocked. Footsteps. A pause. And then, she opened the door. There she was. Amara. Her face was different. Older, maybe, or maybe just harder. Her eyes carried years of battles I hadn't witnessed, but she was still her. Still the woman I once dreamed of growing old with, and beside her, clinging to her leg, was a little boy. Big brown eyes, strong jaw, my eyes. He looked up at me with the same confusion I felt in my chest. My legs nearly gave out. My lips parted, my voice barely a whisper. "Is that—" She didn't answer, not with words. She just looked at me. For a long, heavy second, her eyes scanned my face, searching, maybe for guilt, maybe for regret, maybe for a reason to slam the door harder. And then she did. She shut it, slowly, quietly, like punctuation to a sentence I didn't want to end. I stayed there, breathing through the ache, the silence, and then it hit me. That was my son. That was my son. A sob escaped my chest, raw and ugly. I sank to my knees outside her door, hands buried in my hair, and the memories came like a flood, her laugh echoing through our home, the way she danced barefoot in the kitchen, the night I proposed, hands shaking with joy, then the lies, her tears, my spit, my silence, the betrayal I didn't even try to question. God, what had I done? I covered my face and wept, the kind of weeping that shakes your whole body, the kind you only do when something you love dies and you realize you killed it. No one came out, no one comforted me, and I didn't expect them to. I deserved the pain. I welcomed it. It was the only thing that made sense. Inside the apartment, Amara stood still, holding the child tightly to her chest. He looked up at her. "Mama, who was that?" She didn't answer for a moment. Her hands trembled as she smoothed his curls. "Just someone from long ago." He looked toward the door, curious but unbothered. She watched him quietly, then knelt to his level, brushing a kiss across his forehead. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, Mama." She pulled him close, holding him like he might vanish. Then softly, almost to herself, she said, "He doesn't deserve you." And the screen faded to black.
He came back the next day, and the day after that, always just standing by the gate, watching, waiting, like a man who drowned and finally found the shore, but didn't know if he was allowed to step on it. I ignored him, but Aiden noticed. "Why does the sad man come every day?" he asked, tugging at my skirt. "Because I let him. Because part of me wanted him to hurt, to feel the weight of what he did, every single minute he stood outside, aching. But another part, the part that still remembered how his heartbeat felt against my back at night, that part wasn't as strong as it used to be. So I let him in. Not for me. Not because I'd forgiven him, but because Aiden deserved the truth." He sat on the couch, hands in his lap, eyes lowered like a boy waiting for punishment. I didn't offer him tea, or comfort, or softness. He didn't deserve it. "You have 10 minutes, I said. He looked up slowly, and when he did, I saw what 2 years of guilt looked like. "Thank you," he whispered. I didn't answer. He started slow, stumbling apologies, shaking hands. He tried to explain, to cry, to say he'd been tricked, that he thought he was protecting his family, that he was blinded. But I didn't flinch. I let him speak, and then it was my turn. I told him everything, what it felt like when Ethan stepped into my room that night, reeking of alcohol and entitlement, how I screamed, how no one believed me, how his spit burned worse than fire, how his mother called me a harlot in front of neighbors, how his sisters tore my clothes and dragged me across the street like garbage. I told him about the bleeding, the bruises, the cold park bench where I sat with nothing but a backpack and the secret growing inside me. I told him about the birth, alone, my own screams echoing through a cheap apartment while I prayed the baby would live. I told him how every time Aiden smiled, my heart shattered and rebuilt itself because he looked just like the man who destroyed me. He wept, but I didn't comfort him. He needed to feel it. Every word, every wound. When I finished, there was nothing but silence between us, heavy, final. "I want to be in his life," he said at last, voice cracking. I studied him, and then said calmly, "Under my conditions." He nodded without hesitation. "You see him when I allow it. No contact with your family, no confusing him, no playing house. You're not his father, you're his visitor. You earn that title. Understand?" "Yes," he whispered. "And if you ever try to take him from me, I won't. I'll destroy you, Daniel. I know." We sat in silence. The air between us was thick with the ashes of what we once were. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "I loved you," he said. I looked him in the eye. "You killed me." And then, just as he opened the door to leave, there they were, Mama D, Sarah, Nessa, standing in the hallway, staring at Aiden, who peeked out from behind my leg. The air went still. Mama D gasped. "That's... Daniel, is that your child?" Sarah's voice broke. "Oh my God." Nessa stepped forward, trembling. "Amara, please." Daniel turned to me slowly, but I had already picked up Aiden, pressing him against my chest. "I told you," I said to him, voice low. "No contact with your family." "I didn't call them." "I don't care." Mama D's voice cracked. "Amara, we were wrong. We didn't know." I looked at them all, and without a word, I shut the door again. This time, louder. I never wanted vengeance. All I ever wanted was to be believed. But when they stood outside my door, faces pale with shock, lips quivering with guilt, I realized something. They didn't deserve silence. They deserved to hear the truth, out loud, in front of each other. No more whispers, no more lies. So I told Daniel, "If you want me to even consider letting you near my son again, your family will sit down and listen, every single one of them, and Ethan will confess, in front of me." He agreed. 3 days later, I walked into a room that used to feel like home. It was colder now. The family estate, once filled with laughter and judgment, now choked with regret. Daniel stood beside me. Across the room, Mama D, her hands clenched like she could hold her shame together. Sarah and Nessa sat still, eyes red from crying. Ethan sat alone, face hollow, the weight of his lie tattooed into every line on his skin. I didn't sit. I stood, holding Aiden's tiny hand as he looked around the room curiously. Then I said quietly, "Speak." Ethan didn't lift his head. "Speak, Ethan," Daniel barked. He flinched, then swallowed. "I lied," he whispered. "Louder," I said. "I lied," he snapped, finally standing, his voice cracked. "Amara never touched me. She never seduced me. I went into her room. I wanted to hurt Daniel. I wanted to ruin what they had. I never thought it would go that far. I never thought that you'd destroy a woman's life," I cut in. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I was jealous. I was sick. I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Silence followed. Heavy, unbearable. Mama D broke first. She stood, hands trembling. Amara, I thought I was protecting my son. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said coldly. You didn't listen, she sobbed. I cursed you. I dragged you through the streets like an animal. Sarah and Nessa cried too. We followed what we were told. We didn't question it. We just acted. You tore my clothes, I said flatly. You left bruises on my body while I was pregnant. Nessa covered her mouth, shaking violently. We were wrong. God, we were so wrong. Daniel stepped forward. From this day forward, he said, voice low but firm, I disown Ethan as my brother. His actions destroyed everything. He will apologize, publicly, in front of the community, and so will the rest of you. Ethan blinked. Daniel, I won't raise my son around cowards who hide behind silence. Ethan nodded slowly. The sisters looked down. Mama D collapsed into a chair, weeping uncontrollably, but I stood still, unmoved. I don't want your tears, I said. I want your silence. They looked up at me, pleading, begging. Amara, please, come home, Sarah whispered. Mama D reached for my hand. Let us fix this. I pulled back. You can't. I'll marry you again, Daniel said, eyes locked on mine. We'll start over, as a family. You, me, and Aiden. I'll give you everything you ever deserved. I looked at him, at all of them, and for the first time I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel broken. I felt powerful. You spat on me, I said to Daniel. You cursed me, I said to his mother. You dragged me, I said to his sisters. And you destroyed me, I said to Ethan. I rebuilt myself. Without you. And my son? He will grow up seeing a woman who never went back to the fire that burned her. I took Aiden's hand, turned away, and walked toward the door. Amara, Daniel called after me, his voice breaking. I didn't stop. Then, just as I reached the gate, I heard it, a raw, guttural cry that tore through the estate. I turned slightly. Daniel was on his knees, screaming after me, eyes filled with desperation, grief, and something far too late to be love. I'll wait forever. I didn't look back again, because he will. A year passed. Seasons changed. My son grew taller. His laugh got louder. The pain, quieter. But the memory? It never really left. I kept expecting Daniel to disappear after the door shut that day. After I walked away from his scream, from his pleading, from the mess he helped create. I thought that would be the end. But it wasn't. He didn't chase me again. He didn't call or write. Instead, he watched. From a distance. Quietly. At first, I hated it. The anonymous envelope that arrived every month with school fees paid in full. The quiet man at the back of the parent audience during Aiden's first dance recital. His eyes shining but never stepping forward. The donation made in Aiden's name to the shelter where I used to sleep when I had nowhere else. Daniel never once broke the rules I set. No knocking, no letters, no messages, just quiet presence. And maybe that's what broke the ice. Not the words, but the silence. A silence filled with action, respect, growth. Aiden would ask sometimes, why does the man with the sad eyes always come to my shows? I never knew how to answer, but slowly, I stopped hating the question. One rainy afternoon, I saw him again, standing outside the school gate, holding an umbrella over a stranger's child, waiting for hours to come out. He didn't see me watching, and that's when it clicked. He really had changed, not just for me, but for Aiden. I thought about all the days I'd carried our son alone, the fevers, the birthdays, the scraped knees, the first I love you. I thought about how I'd been mother and father, protector and provider. But I also thought about how much my son looked like him, and how maybe he deserved the chance to know the man he came from. So one day, I wrote a letter. Just 3 lines. You may visit. No promises, no expectations. Come with nothing but the truth. He replied with silence, but 2 days later he arrived. He didn't wear cologne, didn't bring flowers, just came in clean clothes, holding a single old photo of me holding Aiden as a baby, a photo I never knew was taken. When I opened the door, Daniel didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and I saw a different man, not the proud, cruel one who turned on me. This was a man undone, rebuilt, stripped of ego. Behind my legs, Aiden peeked out. Daniel knelt, slowly. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm Daniel. I used to know your mommy, a long time ago." Aiden blinked. "You're the sad eyes man." Daniel smiled through the ache. "I guess I am." My son took a step forward, then another, and then, to my complete shock, he walked right into Daniel's arms. Not with fear, but with instinct, like he knew, like he'd always known. Daniel held him like he was holding the last piece of something precious. And for the first time in years, I let the tears come. He looked up at me, voice shaking. "Thank you." I nodded. We sat together for a few minutes, no words, no plans. Just a quiet presence, like a bruise learning how to fade. As the sun began to set, Daniel stood to leave, but just before he walked out, I said softly, "Daniel." He turned. I looked him in the eye, steady and sure. "You lost your wife." His eyes filled instantly, lips trembling. I stepped forward, placed a hand gently on Aiden's shoulder. "But maybe you can still earn your son." He broke. Right there on the porch, shoulders heaving, silent tears. A man cracked open by his own consequences, and finally beginning to heal. I didn't reach for him, but I didn't close the door either, and that was enough. If you felt every word, every tear, every twist, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that speak to the soul. Tell us in the comments, should Amara ever give Daniel another chance? Would you forgive or walk away forever? Tap the bell so you never miss the next chapter of truth, betrayal, and healing.